Hi guys, I'm Jessica from Truth at Home, and today I'd like to talk about my really horrible and yet totally awesome birth number 8. To start out with, let me tell you how I felt going into this birth. So, previous to this, I had 7 other births, and you might think that after having gone through it so many times that I'd feel comfortable with it. But the truth is that I really felt nervous. And I think most of this had to do with the fact that I knew what to expect. Like, I knew how horrible it was going to be. So while I was pregnant, I would think about the birth sometimes, and I would just feel like I was about to panic. Like, how am I going to be able to deal with this one more time? When I would feel that way, I would just take a deep breath and I would pray. I would say something like, God, I have gone through this before, and I know I can go through it again. I just pray that you would be with me, and that I know you are, but be with me in a special way. Help me to feel your presence with me. Help me to be calm. Help this birth to be a gentle birth. I just pray that you would help me to trust you. Give the people involved with the birth wisdom. Help it all to go well. And whatever happens, I pray that it would all work out for good. And praying like that helped me. I also would read Bible verses that I had written down, and I had up on my mirror on my dresser that I would read verses like, my grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in your weakness. And I would just say, God, your grace is sufficient for me. I pray for a covering of your grace on this whole entire situation, because I certainly am weak and I need it. Verses like that, and that really did help me. So I prayed, I read my verses, I took deep breaths when I felt panicky, and of course I did all the things that you would normally do to prepare for a birth. I made sure that I had my birth kit and everything else that we would need for the actual birth at home, in the birthing pool. So for those of you who don't know, my first 2 births were at a hospital, but after that, every other birth has been at home with a midwife, and it's been a water birth. So that's 2 at the hospital and 6 at home. My births at the hospital weren't traumatic. I have heard other people's stories to where they've had some pretty traumatic experiences, and none of mine have ever been like that. But it wasn't the ideal experience. It wasn't what I really wanted. I really wanted to be at home because it's more comfortable at home and I have more control over the decisions that are made. I'm able to give birth in the way I want to give birth. And it's just, for me, it's a more peaceful environment. And I've never had any kind of high sort of risks, so we were never worried that giving birth at home would be a risky thing for us to do. Okay, so what happened during the birth and how did I handle it? So all of my births have lasted about 10 hours each, from the very first contraction to when the baby comes out. So the whole entire thing lasts only about 10 hours. So it's not too short, not too long. It's really a great length of time, I think. So this labor started in the evening as opposed to some of my other births, which started early in the morning. I don't know why that was, but it just happened that way. And I wasn't as sure first that I was in labor because, during the last month, you have Braxton Hicks contractions, and even some contractions that are similar to the Braxton Hicks, but they actually feel slightly painful, like a labor contraction. And I had been feeling those off and on all throughout the entire last month of my pregnancy. So it was hard for me to tell that labor was actually starting. I really had to just kind of wait it out and see, you know, are these contractions becoming closer together? Are these contractions becoming more regular and more consistent? And when I get up and move around, or when I lay down, when I change from side to side, do they stop or do they continue? So it was only after like a few hours that I was able to tell, okay, yes, these really are labor contractions. I know that for sure now. And I timed them. And by the time I called my midwife, they were already about, 6 minutes between the start of each one. So I called her, and that was about like, the contractions started at about like maybe 8 in the evening, let's say. And I think I finally called her at like 10:30 in the evening, just to give her a heads up that things were starting. And that way she could be prepared to come right away to our house whenever things got more serious. And she would just wait in the office, which is pretty close to our house, waiting for my next call. Anyway, so after that, my husband and I started getting everything ready. The kids were in bed, but we had to wake them up. They were in their pajamas. We already had their bags prepared with their clothes that they would need, so that we could just take them to my parents' house, drop them off. They would have everything that they would need, and we would come pick them up about a couple days later. So we got the kids together. We got them in the van. My husband actually drove them to my parents' house, which was only about 20 minutes away. And my oldest daughter, who was 14, stayed with me while he was gone. And then it worked out to where he came back, and then my daughter went to go with my parents. That way somebody was always with me. So once he came back, he started setting up the birthing pool. I was busy getting out the birthing kit, setting everything out on the table so that we could make sure that everything that the midwives would need was available. By the time I started to feel like the contractions were getting a lot more serious, I basically stopped doing what I was doing, and I sat down and I had a snack. Like I had a banana and some peanut butter and something to drink, because I knew that I would need that nourishment and that extra strength for the birth. And besides, I was hungry. So after that, I decided to call the midwife again. And by then it was, it was like 1 or 2 in the morning. It was sometime around there, because I had to stop when I had a contraction. I had to stop eating so that I could just breathe through it, because it was becoming so much more difficult. And let me tell you how I deal with that. So basically, when I feel a contraction coming on, as soon as it starts, I stop what I'm doing, you know, as long as the contractions are like getting that strong. At the beginning of the labor, I don't really stop what I'm doing. I just let it happen. But later on, once they're stronger, I do. I stop what I'm doing, and I concentrate on breathing, and I take a deep breath in, and I hold it, and then I let it out slowly through my mouth. And I usually hold a bottle of essential oil. I used frankincense for this birth and for the previous one, and I just loved it. There's just something about that scent that to me is really relaxing and soothing and inspiring. So I just hold the bottle about out here, and I'll breathe in, and I can just breathe in that scent along with the breath, and then exhale out. And when I breathe in, I also focus on expanding my tummy and just giving that contraction all the room that it needs. And that also helps me to relax and not tense up. And then as I breathe out, I just relax everything totally. And I've been using that technique for the past several births, and it really, really, really helps. That's something that I've learned. So by the time that I called the midwife again around 2 or so in the morning, I'm like, I really need you to come now, because I think things are getting serious. So she came, and when she came, she checked me, and by that time I was already at 9 centimeters. So I was only 1 centimeter away from the 10 centimeters. And it was getting more serious. So the birthing pool was set up. It already had warm water in it. I got in, and for the next several hours between 2 and 6 in the morning, when the baby was born, I was just dealing with some of the hardest contractions that I had to deal with during this labor. I can't say that they were any harder than any of my other births, but they were certainly as hard as I expected they would be. And near the beginning of that period of time, after the midwife came, and between then and when the baby was born, near the beginning of that time, they weren't too intense. But near the end of that time, they were getting a lot more intense, and I was just feeling like I couldn't deal with it anymore. They were just so, it's that feeling of like my body is doing something that I can't control. I can't do anything to stop it, and it hurts, and I wish it didn't hurt, but I can't make it not hurt. Of course, people can use painkillers, but I didn't want to do that. I don't want to do anything that could interfere in the process of birth, because I know that my body needs to do this. So it was so intense. And yes, it was horrible. I kept praying, God, please help this to be a gentle, pain-free birth. Guide me through this. Help this to be easy. Because I kept thinking, God can do anything. He can make anything happen that he wants to. He can put his hand on me and just help this to just happen easily. And it never really did quite happen that way, even though I do feel like it was a pretty gentle birth compared to some other people's births that I've heard about. But it was still intense. It was still hard to deal with. And for me, it was horrible. It was like, it's not one of those things you ever want to have to deal with. And here you are having to deal with it again. Some of the things that happened, it was embarrassing. It was humiliating. I didn't have complete control over my body. And it was hard. And especially during that period of time when I had to push and the baby was ready to come out, it was really, really intense, and it was really hard. If you want to read my blog post about it, go ahead and go to my blog, theheavenlyhearth.com, and you can see more about this birth, number 8. Even in my blog, I don't give, a super lot of details, because it is personal. But if you want to read more about it than I say in this video, you can go there. Anyway, so the awesome thing about this birth was when the baby was born. Isn't that always the most awesome part of any birth? The horrible part of it was just dealing with the contractions that just literally make you feel like your body is being squeezed like a lemon. And then when the baby's actually coming out, it make you feel like your body is just splitting apart. It's not a fun experience. But then once the baby's born, it's like you forget about all of that. And you're filled with joy and excitement, and everything else disappears. And your focus is just honed in on just the baby. Everything else doesn't even matter anymore. It's like it's a blur. And I was so full of joy when the baby was born. It was awesome. And it's like one of those things to where whenever you go through a really intense experience, it draws you and the person that you go through it with, it draws you together so much closer. And I feel like that's what it did for my husband and I. And that's what it does every time. It just draws us closer because we're going through this so intense experience together. And it's a special experience because this is our child. And I'm glad that he can be a part of the birth. So some final thoughts that I have on the birth are that as hard and as horrible as the experience felt to me, I feel like it was worth it because the baby is worth it. His name is Forrest. He is extremely cute. He's so sweet. He's a joy. And I would never, ever want to go back to not having him in our lives. I wouldn't ever, if I had the power to change the past, I wouldn't change it. I wouldn't say I would not have this baby be born. I would never do that because he is so special. And I know that God has a reason for him being here. He needs to be here. His presence in our home and in this world is necessary. I don't know what God has planned for him. I don't know why he needs to be here, but I know that if he is here, it's because he needs to be here, and God has a plan for his life, a purpose for his life. And I feel extremely honored and privileged to be a part of bringing him into the world and seeing what God is going to do with his life, whatever that may be. So I feel like what I did in being willing to be pregnant with him and go through all of that, and being willing to go through the birth with him and going through all of that and just dealing with a newborn, I feel like it's totally worth it, because Forrest has a plan for his life and an eternal soul that will never die. So when we have children, when I have children, my perspective is that this is an eternal sort of matter. It's one of those things that is, you are able to, when you have a child, you are able to do something that matters for eternity. So even though you may go through hardships and it's hard and it's painful and all of that, it's worth it because you are doing something that matters for eternity. That's what makes it awesome. So I could tell you even more, but that would make this video way much longer than it already is. I welcome you to comment below. Comments on the previous video will no longer be available. That's how I'm dealing with the comments, because otherwise it's just too much for me to deal with. But comments will be open for this video until we post the next one. And I would just love to hear your thoughts on, your experience as a mother. What was it like for you being pregnant? What was it like for you giving birth, caring for a newborn? How did you deal with it? And if I could ask you to please refrain from extremely negative comments, even though I do want you to be honest, and let's focus on being positive and encouraging each other and uplifting each other. Because that's what we all need, right? We need to be honest, but we also need to make sure we're encouraging each other, because this is such a special thing to be a mother and to be able to bring these children into the world. And I want us to be encouraged. Okay, thank you so much. And I really appreciate you all. Thank you for watching my video. I hope to be posting new videos soon. I took a big break, but hopefully we'll be able to get back into video making. Of course, it depends a lot on how things are going with the baby and with homeschooling and all of that. But anyways, until next time.